Hey guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. Now in the last class we finished coding our first Java program in NetBeans using Java, obviously. So in this video we're going to look at different data types in Java. But before we move on to different data types in Java, I want to explain our last program. So the first thing I want to explain is something called comments in Java. So now comments are lines of code which won't be executed by the system and are just for the reference of the coder. So the first thing is a multi-line comment which starts off with a forward slash and a star. Then you type your multi-line comment. So this is a multi-line comment, for example, and then you end it by a star again and a forward slash. Okay, now NetBeans automatically adds the other part, so we won't need that. So as you can see, if I run the program now, none of that got executed. So this is a multi-line comment. Now a single line comment would just be two forward slashes, and this is a comment. That's it. So running it again, it won't be executed. It's important to remember that multi-line comments has an ending tag, whereas a single line comment does not have one. Alright, now let's move on to the section of our video where I explain the last program that we coded. So before I do that, I just want to back this comment section out. So we started our last program with the line public class test. So what we did in that line was we created a public class called test. So there are two ways you can create classes in Java. One is a public class and other is a private class. You do that by just typing class and the class name. So I'm going to call it home. I don't know why. I just feel like calling it home. So this is a private class. So home is a private class right now and test is a public class. So the difference between public class or a private class is that public classes can be called throughout the Java program, whereas private classes can be only inside a public class or an object. So which would make public or private an access modifier. So that was our first line. Then we started with public static void main and string args, and we opened curly braces. So again we created, okay, so main is a method in Java, and we started to call the main method by using public, static, and void. So public again is an access modifier. Static means, okay, static is something quite complex. You don't have to scratch your head if you don't understand it right now. But basically what static means is that, so it lets you create statements before actually creating an object. So that's how static works. And void is something that the whole method does not return any values. And inside the brackets, these are called parameters of the method. So main method is, we're just asking the main method to create a string called args, and it is an array. So that is what we mean by public static void main string args. So we opened the curly braces, then moved on to our main statement, which was system.out.println and hello world. So what we basically did was ask the system to output a line, to print a line, and we called it hello world. We wanted that to print hello world. And then, okay, all of this again, so println, inside the parentheses we're passing the parameters, and then we ended that by a semicolon. So which gave us the following output, hello world. So that's the explanation of the first program that we created in Java. Okay, so now that I've explained the last program, I want to move to the actual topic of today's video, which is data types. So the first data type that I want to cover is something called booleans. So what basically boolean means, or booleans mean, is that they are types of data types which only carry either true or false values. So in order to explain that, I just want to create a class again. So I'm creating a public class called test, and I'm also calling the main method now public static void main, and creating a string called args and passing an array list and opening the braces. So now I want to create a boolean. The way you do that is call out boolean and you name a boolean something, and you give a value. So now we've created a boolean called a. Okay, basically a can be anything you want, but I'm just calling it a in this video. So, and I gave it the value false. Now, if I had to print as a system to print out an output of a, I don't know, line, and passed out a in there and run the program, it gave me false. So there are two different possible values of a boolean, which is either true or false. So every time I print out a, it gives me the respective value of a, which is a boolean. So these are booleans in Java. Okay, so now that we've finished booleans, I want to move on to an important section of Java data types, which are integers. So there are different types of integers that you can define in Java. Actually, let's not type everything again. So let's move on to integers. And the way you define an actual integer, like a most basic integer, is just int and give it a value. So an integer can take any possible value. It can be negative or positive. So I'm just going to print give it a value of 5 in this example. Remember that every value of an integer or any type of data that you want to pass out should be inside the main method. So now we've created an integer called a, and we've given it a value of 5. Now if we wanted to print a, it should give us the value 5 in our console. So like I told, it can be negative values as well. So there are different ways in which you can define integers. So but then the different types will be regarding the types of integers that you want to give. So we can start with byte. So the characteristic of byte is that it is 8 bits in storage, and the range is from negative 128 to 127. So the reason why you would want to do this is because let's say that you want to give a value of negative 128 which is between negative 128 and positive 127. So you would use a byte because it has lower storage data, meaning that your program would be more efficient and can be run faster. So we could possibly give a value of negative 128 and run it in here, which is gonna work. Let's say we gave it something that it can't hold. So we obviously have an error, and the error says so cast to byte. So you can't possibly give it a value which it can't hold. So I don't know, let's give it something which it can hold, and it's gonna give us the output. Okay, now let's move on to the next type of integer that we can define in Java, and the next one's called short, and I'm gonna name this b and give it a value of, I don't know, something, but I'm gonna explain the characteristics of short. So the width of this type of data is 16 bits, and the range is from negative 32,768 to 32,767. So obviously the range of short is way bigger than byte, and it makes sense that it has more storage data too. So that is how it works for short. The next type of actual the next integer type is actually int, which we actually discussed. So I don't know, give it any value. And the characteristics of int is 32 bits, and the range is from negative 2,147, 483 to 2,147, 483, 647. So the range of int is very big. So it depends on the data that you want to assign to the particular integer. So obviously the main intention of a programmer is to run his or her program in the most efficient way possible. So it would make sense to assign the values that is intended to be assigned in Java program to the most efficient type of integer types that we are all seeing here. So the last one's called long D. So I'm gonna assign it something. Actually, okay, it has 64 bits of data, but the range is way too huge, so I don't want to explain that in this video, so let's move on. So the next data type that I want to discuss in this video is called char, which is short for character. And the way you define a character in Java is simple. You just type char and the name that you want to give and the actual character that you want to define. And the character that you want to define should be, you have to keep in mind that it is in between single quotes. And I'm gonna call this, I don't know, something T probably, and then I'm gonna end it. So on running this, I'm gonna get T, which is something that I've defined. So changing it, yeah, so this gives me an error because it is important to remember that the characters that you define can be only of length 1. So running this would be okay, giving it another value but with only single, like, you know, with the length of 1 would still be fine. So this is how you define chars in Java. The next data type that I want to discuss is, I want to discuss two this time, and I'm going to call, those are called double and float. So the difference between double and float is that, okay, the similarities include that they both accept decimal values, but the difference includes double is precise in decimal values and they're precise up to 15 to 16 decimal points, whereas float is just up to 6 and 7. So I could, okay, the way you define a double is just call double and give it a name, I don't know, dub1, and I'm gonna give it a value of 5.432, a really long decimal value, and I want to create a float, and the way you define a float is just float and give it a name. And it's important to remember that there's a specific format that you want to follow before defining floats. So you give the value and end it with an F. So now if I want to print out both these values, which is double1 and another print line of ft1, it would give us both the values. So those are the different data types in Java. Let's make a quick recap before we leave the video. So we learned about booleans, we learned about byte, we learned about short, we learned about int, we also learned about long. We then moved on to char, which is short for character. Then we moved on to doubles. Then we did float. So in total, there are 8 primitive data types in Java. Primitive data types. Primitive data types in Java. So yeah, that's it for today's video. In the next video, we're going to look at some basic arithmetic in Java and also some operators. So make sure you come back and watch that video. So I'm also starting another Blender tutorial series of 3D modeling, so make sure that you check that out too. And if you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and also share it with your friends so that they can learn Java too. Thanks for tuning in today. Bye.